Number 5. The Conjuring. The Conjuring is a 2013 horror film directed by James Wan, written by Chad and Carrie Hayes. It is the first film in the Conjuring universe franchise and also based on real events surrounding the Perron family's demonic experiences. Ed was a World War II vet and a former police officer who became a self-professed demonologist. Lorraine, a self-claimed clairvoyant, making them the best demonic duo out there. In 1952, Ed and Lorraine founded the New England Society for Psychic Research. They quickly gained notoriety as respected investigators after this case. The Perrons. In 1971, the Perron family moved into a 14-room farmhouse in Rhode Island where Carolyn, Roger, and their 5 daughters began to notice odd things happening almost immediately. First, missing items, salt shaker, broom, then some ghostly sightings. Then, well, you'll see. It was discovered that the home had experienced some previous sinister owners, self-immolation, deadly accidents, and of course, murder in the attic. One violent and destructive spirit named Bathsheba. Quote, "Whoever the spirit was, she perceived herself to be the mistress of this house, and she resented the competition of my mother posed for that position." Andrea Perron, the oldest daughter. Bathsheba Sherman, who lived on the Perrons' property circa 1800s, was rumored to have been a Satanist and involved in the murder of a neighbor. According to the oldest daughter, Andrea, there were numerous spirits that lived on the premises. The smell of rotten meat, beds levitating, and of course, the dirt-covered, abysmally cold basement. The Perrons asked the Warrens to come in more than 10 separate times on 10 separate occasions to help out their ghost problem. Lorraine conducted a seance to attempt to contact the spirits that were possessing them, to which during the seance Carolyn Perron was possessed. The family swear that she was speaking in tongues and even rising from the ground, sitting in a chair. Andrea said, "My mother began to speak a language not of this world in a voice not of her own. Then her chair levitated and she was thrown across the room." Yeah, that's all the ingredients you need for an amazing horror movie universe to me. Terrifying. Number 4. The Haunted. In 1991, the works of the late great Warrens was finally approached again after years of their demonic work had slowly and surely began to surface. They began fighting the good fight since the 40s, remember? With the success of the Amityville horror in the late 70s and the popularity it brought to the demonology topic within the US, the Warrens' name and reputation was finally appreciated, and they gifted us another gem of a story to film. This 2-hour, made-for-TV film based on the horrific events that took place within the Smurl home in the 80s. The Haunted, released by 20th Century Fox, earned itself 2 Golden Globe nominations. The case file of the Smurls' haunted house in Pennsylvania in the 1970s was infamous for not only demons, but a certain type of evil entity, the incubus and the succubus. This demonic pair usually haunts a sleeping person, and their possession is usually based around a more explicit manner of haunting. Yeah, Google it up, you'll get it. This film does a semi-tasteful 90s job at expressing what the Smurls were actually working with. Spoiler alert, it's pretty messed up. Demons almost quote-unquote breeding with those it possesses. The Smurls' version of their story was the subject of a 1986 paperback book titled The Haunted, of course, where this movie of the same name gets its inspiration from. The Warrens are introduced and explored for the first time in this film. Like many of the film adaptations, the Warrens are first seen performing college lectures into various hauntings. Lorraine is portrayed by Diane Baker. Ed is played by Stephen Markle. A pretty 90s feel to it, you know? Grainy, it's a little campy at times, but it's the first formula to this huge film franchise. Isn't it cool that Ed and Lorraine have been part of the modern horror scene for like 70 years? Their cases have been a part of the horror landscape way before Wan developed his Conjuring universe. Whether you believe in these cases or not, it's clear that they've made an impact. Number 3, Bill Ramsey. Okay, so these Warrens have covered it all. Ghosts, demons, succubuses, even vampires. I'd love to see a good vampire movie, you know? Just Wan takes it into his universe. I'd love to see it. But werewolves? Like, for real? No way. In the 80s, they were fascinated with this werewolf legend, so Lorraine and Ed Warren traveled across the world in search of a real-life wolf man. They watched a television program, Sightings, in which police officer and locals got interviewed about their encounters with a local werewolf, Bill Ramsey, in London, England. Bill himself was questioned about his abilities to take on men twice his size with ease, as he would rampage through the city, blacking out. Lorraine felt a strange connection to him after this, and after a short trip to London, she found Bill Ramsey's whereabouts. Through British police departments, Lorraine made contact. Lorraine and Ed discovered that unlike most werewolf folklore, he does not change physically every moon, or it wasn't a bite that originally caused him to transform. Bill Ramsey, according to Lorraine, was possessed possessed by an evil wolf spirit and needed help with a full-blown exorcism. The Warrens brought Bill back to Connecticut to meet Bishop Robert McKenna of Our Lady of the Rosary Catholic Church, and he agreed to perform an exorcism for Bill. The exorcism was a success, and thanks to everyone, today Bill lives a pretty normal life. I'd hope so. This is terrifying. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, if that came to theaters, it would probably slap and horrify at the same time. Good problems, you know? Number 2, Japan tour. In the mid-1990s, Ed and Lorraine found themselves overseas in Japan, visiting Nagoya and Tokyo with a team of translators for a small tour of where Ed was stationed in World War II. And of course, some hauntingly terrifying demonic run-ins. First day, they went to see these haunted tunnels. Second day, they have haunted house run-ins with headless samurai. And thirdly, they witness and help out with a full-blown exorcism. Yeah, talk about a busy week. It's like a Warren 3-in-1 package deal. Their first day consisted of visiting a set of condo buildings apparently riddled with a ghost infestation. Beheaded samurai soldiers haunt the hallways, a ghostly couple and the woman ghost of the gallows haunt the premises. The second night, they visited a haunted salt mine tunnel. Ed said it was the scariest place he had ever been to. The tunnel had buried some odd 200 people alive when an avalanche caved miners in. Ouch. The third night consisted of this. That's right, a very, very unsettling real exorcism. Okay, yeah, I'm not sleeping tonight at all. The Warrens sat in on 3 high priests of knowledge and spirituality known as disciples as they watched an apparent snake demon slither its way out of a person before their very eyes. And of course, this footage of a young woman speaking in not her first language, but tongues. Just moaning in agony. It's kind of hard to watch all that demonicness. Spooky level? 10 out of 10, 100%. And the number 1 spot, Maurice Theoreau. And we come to Maurice. This one is terrifying on its own. It doesn't need a 3D movie follow-up. Maurice Theoreau began to notice young he was able to do things that no other man is capable of. Superhuman strength, knowledge of more than his academia showed. He was different. He worked around New England for years doing odd jobs and yet suffering through several relationships. After a physical examination and psychological test failed to bring any solution to the situation, the Warrens were finally called in. The Warrens were gaining popularity as a paranormal aid and had already worked on several cases. The activity ranged from low-level poltergeist activity to this aggressive physical demonic attack stuff. Apparently one night while trying to recite the Hail Mary to make the possession stop, Maurice became so violent he even tried to choke out his own wife. The Warrens made the decision that this was not a normal haunting but a possession and would need the help from Bishop Robert McKenna, who agreed to perform an exorcism. After examining Maurice, Bishop McKenna performed the ritual right away. Dude, that's terrifying. He's just staring off like a reptile. Apparently the demon identified itself simply as, quote, "I am what I am." And also, of course, invoking the kingdom, referring to demons from the legions of evil type stuff. The exorcism was successful, thank God. A young French-Canadian character appears in The Nun, and is supposedly loosely based on the real Maurice, who the Warrens actually think might have been possessed by the devil himself.
Starting us off at number 5, psychic photos. If you're a fan of our channel, you may remember a video that we did on the eerie objects and artifacts that you can observe at Ed and Lorraine's Occult Museum in Connecticut. Well, here they go into detail about one particular type of creepy object that they have a handful of at their museum: psychic photographs. So what are psychic photographs? According to Ed Warren, a psychic photo is a phenomenon in which a camera, being an impartial witness, captures a ghost on film. But the crazy thing is that the image that you see of the ghost is one that it projects itself. An image of what it believes it looks like. This clip explores how exactly that happens, and the Warrens describe instances in which they've witnessed spirit forms appearing beyond the physical eye. Ed also tells of how he captured the White Lady of Union Graveyard with his camera, one of their most famous images.
We could put the first slide up and look at it. Wow.
Well, there you're seeing your stereotype ghost. Look at the appendage-like arms and legs. You know, when you see these little cute ghosts that are painted and drawn on Halloween, this is your stereotype ghost right here.
Number 4, Annabelle. The infamous Annabelle. We know her. The most haunted doll on Earth. First appearing in The Conjuring in 2013, then Annabelle Creation, then Annabelle Comes Home. I'm just waiting for part 4. Annabelle vs. Anderson Silva, UFC 279 live from Las Vegas. Yo, I'm straight up punting a haunted doll if it runs up on me, I'll tell you that for free. The film was inspired by the story of a doll named Annabelle, told by Ed and Lorraine Warren after obtaining and ridding its evil from its toy-like body. The doll is apparently responsible for 2 near-death experiences, 1 fatal accident, and a string of demonic activity. The doll's origins come from a gift to a young nurse named Donna from her mother for her 28th birthday. Donna brought it back to her apartment she shared with a roommate. Pretty normal Raggedy Ann doll. Then the two began to notice she'd move around on her own. They even started finding notes left around saying, "Help me," written on parchment paper, which they had no clue to even where to buy that or find that. Before long, they called in some help from a medium who insisted that the doll was harboring a spirit who had lived and perished on the grounds prior to their building being built. Medium called the priest called his father called Ed and Lorraine. So yeah, this thing is like haunted. You know when priests are like, oh god, no! Yeah, that's usually not a really good sign. Spirits do not possess inanimate objects like houses or toys. They possess people. An inhuman spirit can attach itself to a place or object, and this is what occurred in the Annabelle case. This spirit manipulated the doll and created the illusion of it being alive in order to get recognition. Truly, the spirit was not looking to stay attached to the doll, it was looking to possess a human host. Thank the gods, Ed and Lorraine locked her up in the occult museum where she lays to this day. Just waiting. Number 3. The Haunting in Connecticut. The Haunting in Connecticut is the first of the Warren universe of horror and is based on all real cases and points. A 2009 gem, it accounts the horrific paranormal case of the Snedekers, who moved into a ghost-infested house in Southington, Connecticut. Carmen and Alan Snedeker, their 3 sons, their daughter, and 2 nieces, all unwillingly now pray for the other side. The eldest Snedeker son unfortunately was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and the family moved to Connecticut to be closer to the doctors. What they weren't initially aware of was that the home they were renting was once a funeral parlor. Yeah, tools and bloody furniture just lay as they once did, untouched. Mom notices items going missing. That's just the start. The children start to see strange people in their home at night, specifically a man with long black hair. Their son's drastic personality change, which included violent outbursts and attacks on his family, was then diagnosed with schizophrenia. No one was convinced though. It was agreed that maybe he was becoming a victim to the house's grim history after all. After weeks in the home to get the full demonic experience, the Warrens came to the conclusion that the morticians that worked on the home previously had practiced some abysmally sinister acts on the lifeless bodies, deepening the home in a twisted, dark origin. After Ed and Lorraine were called in to clean it up, an exorcism or 2, and the house finally became a home again. The case can be reimagined in 2009's Haunting in Connecticut, where the story follows the truth the Snedekers experienced all those years ago. It's pretty scary, yeah. Number 2, The Nun, the 2018 spin-off film and prequel to The Conjuring 2. A demon nun channeling an evil spirit named Valak. The Nun serves as an origin story of sorts within the Warren universe. Sister Irene and priest Father Burke travel to investigate a monastery in 1952 Romania after the Vatican learns of an accident and summons the father to investigate. According to the Lesser Key of Solomon from the 17th century, Valak is the Grand President of Hell. Valak's look in both films were inspired by an experience Lorraine had shortly after investigating the Amityville horror house in 1976. Lorraine was at home in her bed reading when she felt a presence. She saw a black whirlwind of dark mass enter the room. It was like a vortex. Lorraine prayed to be released from the forces of evil. She told it, "Leave and go back where you came from," over and over again. It vanished, but she never forgot. And cue scary movie. Yeah, apparently while investigating the once very haunted Borley rectory, the most haunted spot in the UK, Lorraine had a run-in with a sinister nun. They ended up coming face to face with the churchyard's ghost, who was, according to lore, a nun buried alive behind the brick walls of the convent centuries ago after having an affair. Apparently Ed took photos on his camera of the Borley rectory ghosts as they encountered them. Quote, "It was pitch black and there were no lit candles or lights. Photographers snapped photos on a 35mm camera with infrared film. When they developed the images, what appeared to be a spectral nun was seen walking down the aisle praying." And number 1, part 2, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. Sounds like a lame Satanist excuse, doesn't it? Actually, now a term of phrase pleaded before a court of law. Yeah, who knew? Could possession under demonic circumstances prove innocence over acts performed while Under. This is the 8th installment of the Conjuring universe. The plot is as follows. It's 1981. Ed and Lorraine documented the exorcism of 8-year-old David Glatzel, attended by his family, his sister Debbie, her boyfriend Arn Johnson, and Father Gordon of Connecticut. During the exorcism, Arn invites the demon to enter his body instead of remaining in the boy's. The family, including the Warrens, witnessed the demon transport itself from David's body to Arn's body while he suffers from a heart attack and is taken to the hospital unconscious. Arn and Debbie return home, but Arn is left feeling a little unwell and eventually ends up murdering his landlord, stabbing him 22 times due to this demonic possession. Yeah, sounds pretty terrifying, doesn't it? His case becomes the first American murder trial to claim demonic possession as a defense. Well, sorry to break it to you, but this is literally a play-by-play of the events that actually happened. Yeah. Maybe not shot for shot, movie style, but the script and skeleton was there for sure. Arn was subsequently convicted after a messy murder trial, though he served only 5 years of a 10 to 20 year sentence. The case was huge. It attracted huge media attention and in fact was the first in history of the US claiming the paranormal as a defense. The couple went on to marry each other, and tell their story as the Warren side as well. Books, documentaries, and eventually this huge film universe. Yo, all of this just got way more scary, right? Like, I gotta rewatch all 8 parts. Who am I kidding? I'm not gonna watch them. I watch horror movies like this. Number 5, Amityville. Believe it or not, there's actually 39 film adaptations made surrounding this case. Yeah, it's the OG case. The first crack at getting this terrifying formula down that we all love today. The Amityville Horror. Yes, the infamous haunting that took place on November 13th, 1974 at 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville, New York. Well, in some versions, 108 Ocean Avenue. Places like that get really popular, you know? The Amityville Horror is a book by American author Jay Anson, published 1977, and it's also the basis of one of the scariest movies ever released from 1979 onwards. The paranormal experiences by the Lutz family has just led to great movies, you know? Spooky stories. It unfortunately has also led to controversy, lawsuits, name defacing, and of course murders and life sentences. But that was before all the media stuff. Hey, it was gruesome times. The LA Times said it was actually more hideously frightening than The Exorcist because it actually happened. DeFeo was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 6 life sentences. All of his parole appeals have been denied. For nearly 13 months after the murders, the house remained empty until it was bought by the Lutz family. And cue terrifying movie. When the Lutzes moved in, the furniture from the DeFeo family remained intact from the night of the murders. Yeah, they actually didn't know. They just thought it came furnished. That's a ripoff also, I'd be pissed. New couch smell? Nope, just ghost plasma. Yuck. The Warrens' most famous case was the Amityville haunting. This is where 6 members of the DeFeo family were found dead in their beds in 1974. A year later, the Lutzes moved in, and 28 days of this, basically. Also, let us know in the comments down below which Ed and Lorraine case scares the bejesus out of you the most. Like, which movie won't you watch, you know? I don't do dolls, dude. Annabelle gets me every time, I swear to God.
And at number 4, the Amityville House. This piece of footage, published by Mysterious World, features Lorraine Warren retelling her experience at the Amityville House. The Warrens in the past had gone to the famous Amityville House. It's one of their most famous cases. It's the place in which a man named Ronald DeFeo Jr. shot and killed 6 family members of his in 1974. And a year later, a new family, the Lutz family, had moved into the residence, only to be terrorized by a violent demonic presence. The Warrens had visited the house in an attempt to help the Lutz family, part of which was adapted into the 2016 movie The Conjuring 2. In this video clip, we get more insight on what the real-life events that occurred there were like. Lorraine tells her interview that, I quote, "Places like Amity, if you gave me $1 billion, I wouldn't go in that house again, because it messed up my life and my husband's life." She also tells the interviewer that the Amityville house was where she levitated, which is pretty creepy. And at number 3, the effects of seeing a ghost. This 7-minute video features Ed and Lorraine Warren alongside a guest of theirs named Rod. Rod had seen multiple ghosts and has a discussion with the paranormal experts about the aftermath of seeing a ghost and how it affects one's life. He goes on to explain the intense sorrow that he felt after seeing the ghost, which just so happened to be the White Lady of Union Graveyard. He experienced night terrors, was extremely upset, and had excessive tremors for months, reoccurring whenever he was reminded of the event. Ed goes on to explain that the sadness that Rod felt is something called radiotelethesis, which happens when a human picks up on the emotions of a spirit when they have a close physical encounter. The fact that something like this could occur to any individual is pretty darn creepy.
A good friend of mine had died, and a couple nights after that, sitting in my bedroom, I saw the figure of a woman in front of my windows. So my bed was on this end of the room and my windows were there. And from the light coming in, I could see a woman sitting looking out my bedroom window. And where the window ended, that's where the figure ended.
And at number 2, the Borley Rectory. The Borley Rectory is said to be one of the most haunted places in the UK. A nun had been buried within the walls of its church, and once found was moved to a nearby graveyard. But ever since, there's been some serious haunting. According to this video though, Ed and Lorraine have been to that location over 200 times. Talk about courage. The duo discussed their first experience at Borley Church in 1976, with Lorraine saying that the investigator that she was with, who was very skeptical to begin with, was assaulted by a spirit, claiming he could not breathe, and that something was pushing him. Later on, they listened back to the audio that they were recording while they were there. Lorraine said that you could hear a woman's voice over his screaming, saying the words, "Hit him, hit him." And finally, in at number 1, Poltergeists. In this clip from a documentary, Ed and Lorraine talk about poltergeists and their dangers. It features a clip of them that they recorded with a family in Connecticut dealing with a poltergeist, with the family's face blurred out in order to give them privacy. It starts off with the group saying prayers, and then Ed tries to communicate with the spirit. We hear the spirit making banging noises in response. Ed proceeds to ask the spirit who it doesn't like, listing off each individual in the family. It finally answers yes via the knocking to the family's mother. Then Ed confronts the poltergeist on his own, and we see chairs and furniture moving around the room. The video continues, showing a clip of the family's little girl being bothered by the poltergeist, who moves the chair that she's sitting on. The Warrens would then later call a priest to perform an exorcism, which wasn't on camera. Arguably, you can see why. Although by the end of the clip, the two of them note that there's no way of knowing if a poltergeist may or may not come back to haunt the family.
In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to reveal your identity.